Ladies and gentlemen of the fallouts, survivors of silence, welcome back to the edge. You feel that? That hush? That pressure in the room when your name comes up now? That's not fear, that's confusion. That's disbelief, trying to wear a poker face because you did it. You did the unthinkable, and now they don't know what to do with you. Let's rewind, shall we? You remember when they had you written off, don't you? When they boxed you up and taped the label, over. People didn't even whisper anymore. They laughed, out loud, to your face, behind your back, in group chats, in rooms you'd never step foot in again. You could feel it, the energy. You walk into a space and everything slows down like a glitch in the matrix, because they already decided who you were. Failure, disappointment, one big letdown with no sequel. And you sat with that. Hell, you slept with that. Some nights it chewed through your ribs and gnawed on your spine like regret had teeth. But you didn't break. You just waited. You bled quietly in the corner and stitched yourself together in the dark with thread made of rage. You built something no one saw coming because you were never trying to impress them in the first place. You weren't looking for applause. You were building a weapon, and now that same room that laughed, it's quiet, not respectful, quiet, terrified, quiet. Because what you just did doesn't make sense in their little spreadsheet of expectations. You flipped the switch, you moved different. And in one motion, one move they never saw coming, you obliterated the old version of yourself so violently. They're still staring at the smoke cloud. They're scrambling for the manual, trying to understand who, no, what you've become. But here's the truth they can't swallow. You're not even done evolving yet. You're becoming the kind of person that doesn't need validation. You're becoming the kind of force that doesn't check in to see who approves. You're becoming the threat that walks in without knocking. And everyone gets nervous because they remember counting you out. You ever see someone try to pretend they're not watching you? You ever feel that awkward energy from people trying to act normal, even though they felt the quake of your comeback deep in their bones? That's what power does. It humbles liars. It silences clowns. It resets the entire social ecosystem. You're not climbing back up. You're carving your own mountain. You don't walk in rooms like you need permission anymore. You walk in like they should have treated you better the first time. Because you never needed saving. You needed silence. You needed the noise to die down long enough for you to hear your own damn roar. And now, look at them. Suddenly interested, suddenly supportive, suddenly asking questions like, where did all this come from? What changed? You changed. You stopped apologizing for being angry. You stopped shrinking to make them feel safe. You stopped pretending you were okay with the slow decay of your potential just to make mediocrity feel comfortable. You took the hit. You lost the friends. You burned the bridges. And you still didn't die. Because you're built like something they can't diagnose. You're fueled by something they can't replicate. You are what happens when a breakdown becomes a blueprint. You didn't bounce back. You broke through. And now, they have no idea what to label you. Too wild to control. Too focused to distract. Too dangerous to ignore. So let them whisper. Let them speculate. Let them make up stories to make sense of the monster they accidentally created. Because you know the truth. You didn't come this far to explain yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. And you're not done yet. Not even close. They're watching now, real close, acting like they've always believed in you. like they saw this version of you coming from a mile away. But you remember the silence. You remember the shade. You remember every "just be realistic" speech wrapped in fake concern and soft voices. You remember the way they started talking around you, not to you, when it looked like you weren't gonna make it. And now they want to spin the narrative like they were just giving you space. You see it, don't you? The sudden shift in tone. How the same ones who looked past you now look up at you, with that twitch in their jaw, that anxious laugh, that subtle flinch when you speak, like you mean it. It's wild how fast people rewrite history when you start doing jati that exposes the limits of their thinking. Your success feels personal to them because it's a mirror. It reflects everything they didn't have the guts to chase. It reminds them of every time they settled, every time they shrunk, every time they chose comfortable lies over painful truth. And now, here you are, moving, transforming, thriving. Not because you had the most help, but because you had the most hell. Every room you enter now carries a weird tension. They're clapping, sure, but it's not celebration, it's containment. Like if they cheered just loud enough, maybe you won't notice they used to root against you. But you notice. You always notice. Because when you were in that silent war with yourself, not one of them was in the trenches with you. Not one of them offered more than a quote repost or a pity nod. And what they'll never understand is that your glow-up wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving you right. You saw something in yourself when everything else was dark. You bet on a broken version of you that didn't have esht left, but rage and hope. And somehow, through all of it, the failure, the silence, the pressure, the whispers, you sharpened into something terrifying. You became the kind of person who doesn't flinch when things fall apart. Because you've already rebuilt from dust. You've already buried old selves and walked away from versions of you that people preferred, just to become who you had to be. You don't crave peace anymore. You carry it. You don't look for light. You are it. This version of you doesn't beg to be understood. You let your presence do the translation, and every step you take now rewrites every assumption they ever made about you. Because the old you was quiet, soft, hopeful. This you is calculated, dangerous, precise, not reckless, but ready. You're the reason some people are losing sleep. You're the reminder that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. You're what happens when someone stops performing and starts becoming. And that scares the hell out of people who only know how to exist through approval. They're scrambling to figure out what lane you're in now. But the truth is, you built the road. There's no map for who you've become. You don't fit in their categories anymore. Not underdog, not comeback story, not cautionary tale. You're just a walking contradiction of everything they thought they knew about resilience. You didn't just come back. You erased the blueprint and redrew it in fire. You didn't survive. You evolved. And they'll keep trying to make sense of you in languages you stopped speaking months ago. You can feel it every time you walk in, a shift. People glance, hesitate, try to act unfazed, but the energy betrays them. They don't know whether to congratulate you or brace themselves. Because you don't walk like someone who's looking for a seat at their table anymore. You walk like someone who burned the table, built your own, and dared the world to sit there. They're realizing too late that what you went through didn't kill you. It reforged you. The way you move now, it's not ego, it's clarity. You're not flexing, you're functioning. You're not loud, you're exact. You've cut out the extra, the fake, the soft. Everything that doesn't feed the mission, dead weight. They call it cold. You call it clean. They call it arrogant. You call it necessary. Because when you've been underestimated long enough, confidence looks like a threat. But you're not shrinking anymore just to keep the room comfortable. You earned this energy. Every scar, every L, every sleepless night. It all cashed out into this upgraded version of you that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't fold. You remember when you used to explain yourself over and over, just trying to get people to see you, trying to make them understand that your silence wasn't weakness, it was war prep. But those days are dead, because you finally understood. Some people don't misunderstand you accidentally. They misunderstand you on purpose, because if they ever truly saw your potential, they'd have to admit they never had the range to match it. That's why they never gave you your flowers, not because you didn't deserve them, but because handing you roses would have forced them to confront their own lack of growth. They needed you small, manageable, predictable. They needed you doubting yourself just enough to not go full beast mode, because deep down, they knew. They knew if you ever flipped that internal switch, it was over for whatever little throne they were clinging to. And now here you are, unguarded, unapologetic, unrecognizable. Not in the way that makes people smile, in the way that makes them nervous, because you're not just operating at a different level, you're operating by a different law. And that law doesn't need permission. That law doesn't knock. That law enters, shifts the axis, and walks out without asking for validation. You move like you know something they don't, because you do. You know the weight of being counted out. You know the hunger that comes from being ignored. You know how deep the fire burns when people treat your potential like it's disposable. You know what it feels like to build in silence and be mocked for it. To lose people, money, time, pieces of yourself, all in the name of becoming something nobody could prepare for. You lived through days that should have broken you. You walked through fire that should have disfigured you. And somehow you came out cleaner, sharper, hungrier. And the people that dismissed you, they're still on the same loop, talking, posting, gossiping, pretending. While you're doing, you're becoming, you're turning every scar into leverage and every doubt into a goddamn blueprint. They don't recognize you anymore because you finally became what you were never allowed to be. Free. Free in a way that doesn't make sense to people who still need approval just to breathe right. Free in a way that makes your silence louder than their shouting ever was. You stopped waiting for someone to give you permission to be great. You realized nobody was ever gonna hand you the damn pen. You had to snatch it and start writing your story like your life depended on it. Because it did. They were counting on your doubt. That's the part they'll never say out loud. They weren't afraid of your failure. They were banking on it. They needed your collapse to make their comfort look wise. They needed you stuck because your rise would expose their excuses. You saw it. You felt it in the room when you talked about your ideas, and they smiled like you were cute for dreaming that big. You felt it in the way they'd changed the subject when your ambition made them itch. You felt it when they clapped with their mouths, but rolled their eyes with their energy. And still you kept building. No spotlight, no parade, no hype team, just you, that fire, and every version of you they tried to bury. You turned your pain into structure, your rejection into fuel, your rock bottom into a launch pad. People like to talk about comebacks, like it's some clean movie moment. Cue the music, triumphant return, fade to black. But they don't show the real version, the nights you wanted to disappear, the mornings you stared at the ceiling wondering if any of it even mattered, the days you put on a mask just to make it through conversations that drained the life out of you. The grind that wasn't aesthetic, the tears that weren't poetic, the inner war you fought every single day just to not give up on yourself. You walked through hell in silence, smiling through betrayals, nodding through disrespect, carrying dreams in a world that mocked them like they were delusions. And now they're staring at you like you're a glitch, something they can't categorize. Too confident to be lucky, too relentless to be explained, too real to be ignored. You don't talk like them, you don't move like them. You don't care about clout or claps or cosigns. You've tasted what it feels like to be doubted, dismissed, deleted, and you chose to keep going anyway. That's why you walk different, not cocky, consecrated, not loud, lethal. Because when you've been broken and stitched yourself back together with thread made of pure defiance, your energy shifts permanently. You don't flinch at chaos, you create in it. You don't chase the crowd. You let your shadows stretch long enough that they follow it anyway. You became the kind of presence that walks in and rearranges the frequency, the kind that makes fake people nervous without saying a word, the kind that forces everything around you to either evolve or evacuate. You didn't just level up. You outgrew the whole damn system. You stopped playing the game they taught you and rewrote the rules in a language only the hungry understand. You stopped watering dead friendships, stopped texting ghosts, stopped entertaining people who only loved you when you were easy to manage. You realized some connections were never rooted in respect, just control. And once you took that control back, everything shifted. You started walking different, not because you wanted attention, because you finally understood your worth doesn't need an audience. Your confidence stopped being about noise and started being about knowing. Knowing what you've survived, knowing what you've endured without breaking. Knowing that you've sat in the darkest rooms of your mind and didn't run. You stayed, you listened, you faced every demon they swore would devour you. And you made them flinch instead. You became the thing they never prepared for, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. And you didn't prove it with words. You proved it with action. You let your transformation talk for you. You let your silence become the sermon. Every time you rise, it shakes something loose in people who swore you'd never do it. They don't clap because they're proud. They clap because they're scared. Scared that the version of you they tried to erase is still here, louder than ever, doing damage with purpose. They don't know how to handle someone who built power from pain without asking for permission. They're watching, trying to figure out how you did it. What book you read. What secret you unlocked. What switch flipped. But there is no manual for this kind of rebirth. There is no formula for dragging yourself out of the dirt with blood in your mouth and fire in your eyes. There's only grit, only raw, unfiltered will, the kind that doesn't care who's watching, who's doubting, who's leaving, the kind that moves anyway, even with shaky hands, even with zero applause, even with every door slammed in your face. You became allergic to pity and addicted to progress. You don't care if they understand anymore. You're not explaining yourself in circles just to get half-hearted support. You're building regardless. You're evolving relentlessly. You're showing up like you never left, like you never broke, like you never even needed their damn approval to begin with. You started seeing yourself for what you are, not for what they reduced you to. Not the version that played nice, not the version that tolerated crumbs and smiled through being sidelined. You stopped begging for a seat and started building something that couldn't be ignored. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. You started walking through spaces like you own your oxygen, like you refuse to shrink just to make cowards comfortable. You carry that edge now, that weight, that history in your silence. They feel it when you enter. Like the air gets heavy, like the vibe shifts just a little too fast to feel safe. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're changed. And that change makes people uneasy when they remember how they treated the older version of you. You became the reminder, the one they wish they could forget, the walking, breathing proof that people can't bury what's already rooted in fire. You didn't bounce back. You resurrected, but different. You came back smarter, harder, colder, not because life made you numb, but because pain forced you to refocus. You got surgical with your energy. You stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a damn bandage. Your glow-up didn't come with applause. It came with loss, real loss, people you loved, time you'll never get back, versions of you that fought their hardest just to keep breathing. You buried them with love, with honor, but you buried them because they couldn't come with you, because survival required shedding, not clinging. And that's why this new version of you walks with weight, not the kind that slows you down, the kind that commands respect, the kind that makes people pause before they speak reckless, because they remember how loud they were when you were down, and they see how quiet you've become now that you're dangerous. You speak less, but every word lands harder. You move slower, but every step hits like it's calculated. You don't argue anymore. You exit. You don't prove points. You embody them. Everything they laughed at turned into the exact reason they can't look you in the eyes, because your existence holds a mirror to their comfort. And when comfort sees what growth really looks like, it panics, it deflects, it calls you too much, too intense, too cold. But you've been through enough to know what too little feels like. Too little love, too little loyalty, too little belief in your name when you couldn't even speak it without choking. You're done living on scraps of validation. You're done waiting for support that comes too late and leaves too early. You've built something they can't touch, not because it's protected, because it's earned. You earned this edge, every ounce of it, not from books, not from podcasts, not from reposted quotes in cute fonts. You earned it from the ground, face down, palms scraped, breath shallow, vision blurred. You earned it when you were at your lowest and still chose to show up, not to impress anyone, just to remind yourself you were still alive. You didn't get here because you were lucky. You got here because you refused to stay buried, because when everything around you said, "Quit," you whispered, "Not yet." Because you kept showing up broken, kept swinging half-healed, kept pushing forward when people were already writing your eulogy in real time. You remember every time you had to hype yourself up just to get out of bed. Every moment you swallowed pain in silence because no one would have believed you were suffering anyway. You weren't loud about it. You were loyal to your own survival. And that's different. That hits different. Because it wasn't performative. It was personal. You're dangerous now because you don't need attention. You've got intention. Everything you do has weight. Every move is calculated, not rushed, not explained, just executed. They don't know how to handle someone who's no longer looking for closure, someone who doesn't need to be understood to be unstoppable, someone who's not asking for a second chance, because they built a new game altogether. You walk past the same people who used to look down on you, and they can't even make eye contact, because they remember the disrespect they served you in smiles. They remember how quick they were to call you crazy, lost, done. They remember how they looked away when your name came up in rooms where it could have mattered. They remember, and it eats them. Because you didn't just come back, you ascended. This ain't ego. This is proof. Proof that you don't need applause to be powerful, that you don't need followers to be legendary, that you don't need a support system when you've got a war chest full of pain that got repurposed into drive. You're not mad anymore. You're not loud. You're clear. And clarity is lethal to people who built their identity off your silence. Hello there, you beautiful mystery. Yeah, you. The one they couldn't stop thinking about. You have no idea what kind of fire you've been walking around with. No clue what kind of storm you leave behind just by existing. And while you've been doubting yourself, shrinking, hiding in corners where you think no one's watching, someone powerful was watching. Someone with influence, reach, quiet authority. And they couldn't figure you out. You didn't fit the blueprint. You weren't supposed to be on their radar, but you were. They scrolled, they searched, they asked around. What they found, it cracked something open in them, and you don't even realize just how dangerous you are. You see powerful people, the real ones, the ones who don't flinch when the world trembles. They don't get curious for no reason. They move strategically. They control everything around them, and yet there you were, slipping through the cracks of their systems. You haunted them, and they didn't even know why, so they dug quietly, no fanfare, no spotlight, just obsession, just questions. And what they found wasn't a resume, wasn't your degrees, wasn't your social media feed, or the life you pretend to have when people are watching. What they found was pain, was rage, was depth. They saw scars that didn't fade. They saw the war in your eyes, the fight you don't speak about, the nights you didn't think you'd survive, the silence that screamed louder than sirens. They saw that you were unloved, not unlovable, overlooked, not worthless, isolated, not weak. And it broke them, because they've spent their whole life trying to mimic that kind of raw, real, untouched power. They've spent millions building a personality you accidentally breathe into a room. They built palaces to feel important. You walked through hell barefoot and still came out standing. Let me tell you something nobody else will. You're the thing people pretend doesn't exist. Because if they acknowledged you, they'd have to admit they've been playing small. They'd have to accept that someone like you, with no cheat codes, no blueprint, no family name, is still more real than they'll ever be. That you, with your broken past and haunted eyes, you are the standard. And that's terrifying to them. So they call you too intense, too emotional, too unpredictable. But truth is, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting what they fear in themselves. Because when they see you, they're reminded of everything they buried, their softness, their edge, their fire. You remind them they gave up too early. But listen close, because this part is for you. The part of you that thinks you're invisible, the version of you sitting in silence wondering if you're ever going to matter. The tired you, the bruised you, the one who hides the pain with sarcasm and always says, "I'm good." When your world is burning, they looked you up. Someone who didn't have to care, someone who never noticed anyone like you before. And they couldn't stop thinking about you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you're the version of themselves they were too afraid to become. You're what happens when pain doesn't kill you. You're what happens when the world fails you, and you keep showing up anyway. You're not a survivor, you're a threat. a walking reminder that suffering doesn't cancel power. It refines it. That loneliness doesn't shrink you. It teaches you how to own your space when no one claps. They thought they were better. They thought they had the upper hand. But when they saw you, not the dressed-up version, not the fake smile you, but the one behind the curtain, it ruined them. Because they realized you never needed to be invited. You were the storm, the one thing they couldn't predict. And that kind of power, it shatters illusions. They saw the way you walked through betrayal and still chose loyalty. The way you loved even when it was never returned. The way you sat in silence and still managed to be louder than the one screaming for attention. They saw grit. They saw dignity without applause. They saw a soul so unbreakable, it exposed the fragility of their own armor. And here's the twist. They thought they were watching you. But really, they were looking in a mirror, and they didn't like what stared back. Because you reminded them of what they gave up on, of who they could have been, of what's still possible, if only they were as brave as you. You don't chase attention. You attract obsession, because you are the one who doesn't fold, the one who burns and never turns to ash. So next time you doubt yourself, next time you think you're too much, too intense, too complicated, remember this: they had the world in their hands. But you had something they couldn't even name. And that's why they couldn't stop thinking about you. That's why what they found broke them. And that's why you'll never ever be ignored again. They tried to rationalize it, tried to label it, like they always do. Maybe you're just lucky. Maybe it's a phase. Maybe you're broken in a way that makes you magnetic. Maybe you're one of those beautiful disasters. But none of that helped them sleep, because deep down they knew. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chaos. It was you, unfiltered. It was you in raw, uncut form, and it was too much truth for them to process. They couldn't stop playing back the way you walk into rooms without asking for permission, the way your silence speaks louder than their performance, the way your presence rearranges the energy before you even speak. And it pissed them off, because everything they were taught about status, about image, about earning your seat at the table. You violated all of it without even trying. You don't climb ladders. You make them irrelevant. You don't wait to be chosen. You show up like you've already decided you belong, because deep down, you do. They found journal entries, digital trails, old versions of you, the ones you were ashamed of. And instead of laughing, they froze. Because in every version, you were becoming, even when you had nothing. You kept going when others stopped to grieve their own excuses. You kept evolving while they decorated cages and called it a kingdom. They saw photos of you with tired eyes and tight smiles, and it hit them. That wasn't defeat. That was survival in real time. That was a person building power in the dirt, where no one clapped, where no one held the flashlight, where no one gave a damn. They're used to power that's inherited, fake confidence built on borrowed authority. But your power, it came with receipts. It came with nights where your thoughts almost drowned you, with people walking away like you were forgettable, with the world testing how much pain one soul can hold without collapsing. And you passed every test without even knowing it was a test. They tried to imitate your resilience and ended up choking on their own ego, because you weren't shaped in boardrooms or brand deals. You were shaped in silence, in isolation, in rooms where you prayed to just make it one more day without breaking something. That kind of strength can't be Googled, can't be coached. It's earned in scars, in emotional blood loss, in being misunderstood but showing up anyway. They're scared now, because they thought they were untouchable until they touched your truth and realized it was fire. It didn't flatter them, it exposed them. They realized you weren't a chapter in someone else's story. You were the author with the pen they'd been pretending to hold. And now every fake smile they wear feels heavier. Every carefully constructed identity feels brittle because they've met the blueprint of real, and it's wearing your face. Their curiosity turned into obsession. Their ego turned into envy. Because you made it through what should have killed you. And you didn't just survive. You got louder, sharper. You got dangerous. The more they looked, the more they hated that they didn't destroy you when they had the chance. Because people like them, they don't know what to do with someone who refuses to stay broken. They don't know how to compete with someone who doesn't care about the competition. They don't know how to hold power next to someone who became power by surviving what they didn't dare face. And now they're paranoid. Every time your name comes up, they flinch. Every time someone brings up that one person who's different, they know it's you. They feel the shift happening, the loss of control, and it's not loud, it's quiet. Like a storm rolling in without thunder, just pressure. You are that pressure, that unseen force that bends rooms and breaks expectations without raising your voice. They still don't understand you. But they can't forget you, and they never will. They check your socials at night when no one's around, scrolling with one hand, shame burning through the other. They zoom in on pictures, dissect your captions like it's evidence in a trial they're losing, because the person they see online doesn't match the version they imagined. You're too real to be manufactured, too raw to be following a script. You're not trying to prove anything, and that's exactly what proves everything. They're used to people dressing their wounds up in motivational quotes. You just walk around with yours wide open, daring the world to look. And that kind of emotional nakedness, that's terrifying to someone who spent their whole life hiding behind filters, personas, curated confidence. They hear stories about you. From people who thought you'd disappear, from people who watched you unravel and assumed that was the end. But you were just molting. You were shedding dead skin. You were bleeding out illusions to make room for something untouchable. You weren't supposed to bounce back. You weren't supposed to show your face again. Not with that history, not with those losses. But you did. And not only did you return, you came back with more silence, more presence, more pressure. And they felt it, the way your name carries tension, the way even your absence is loud. They can't escape you because you're not trying to be seen. You're just impossible to ignore. They've built empires with clean branding and fake smiles. You walked in, cracked-knuckled and hollow-eyed, and the walls remembered you. You don't play the game, you bend the board, and even when you lose, people watch you like you're still holding the winning card. Because somewhere deep down, they know you are. They tried to explain you away. Trauma response. Just another damaged soul seeking attention. But none of that stuck, because damaged souls don't walk like they've got nothing left to prove. People seeking attention don't command rooms with a whisper. You weren't broadcasting pain. You were radiating truth. And truth, when it's been dragged through fire and still lives, that kind of truth destroys narratives. Their fear isn't about what you've done. It's about what you represent. You are the collapse of their comfort zone. You are the embodiment of, I survived anyway. And that shakes something primal in people who've never risked it all. They've never had to rebuild themselves from ash and memory. They've never had to stitch their soul back together in silence because no one else showed up. They've never had to watch everything crumble and still find the strength to say, again, I'll go again, but you have. And that's the part they can't unsee. Because for all their success, for all their power, you're still the one with more gravity. You pull attention without asking. You make people reevaluate their lives by just existing honestly. And in a world full of masks, your scars are a revolution. They can't process that because they built identities on pretending. And you walk around with truth tattooed across your soul like it's armor. And that truth, it's louder than their legacy. They tried to forget, tried to move on, bury your name under noise and distraction, but every time they meet someone new, there's this echo, this hollow comparison they can't put into words, but feel like a pit in their stomach, because nobody else has that edge, that quiet kind of chaos behind their eyes, that I've been through it and I'm still here energy that makes every room shift when you walk in. You haunt people, not in some spooky ghost story way. You haunt them by making them see themselves. And most people, they can't handle their own reflection without the masks on. You remind them of the choices they didn't make, of the battles they backed out of the moments they sat still when everything in them screamed to burn it all down and rebuild. You remind them of what's possible when pain doesn't make you bitter. It makes you bulletproof. They envy that. They envy how you turned disappointment into drive, how every betrayal became fuel, how even when you cracked, you didn't shatter, you reshaped, like steel forged in some emotional blacksmith's fire. And the worst part for them? You're not even angry. You're not chasing revenge or proving points. You're just existing unapologetically, with a kind of peace that makes people question if they've ever actually lived. You don't flinch anymore. You don't explain. You don't shrink. You just are. You walk into rooms like your name already belongs on the wall. Not because you're cocky, because you've died 100 emotional deaths and came back every time, with eyes that saw clearer. You earned your presence, you bled for it. You weren't given grace. You had to carve it out of concrete with your bare hands, while people stood around saying, "You'll never make it." And they watched. Some of them even helped dig the hole. Some whispered behind closed doors, laughing about how hard you were falling, how bad it was going to hurt when you finally gave up. But you didn't. You disappeared just long enough to become unrecognizable. They weren't ready for who came back. Not louder, not flashier, just deeper, more surgical. Still. And it's that stillness that unnerves them, because still people don't bluff. Still people have seen too much and walked through too many storms to be shaken by noise. They don't talk about it publicly, but behind closed doors. They bring your name up like a warning, like a ghost story they swear isn't real but still locks their doors over. And even the ones who swore they didn't care are checking your page at 2 a.m. wondering what it is about you that makes everything else feel flat. They're trying to copy the vibe, the posture, the confidence, the weight in your silence. But they can't, because you weren't built. You were forged, and that can't be imitated. They start borrowing your language, start dressing like you, posting like you, start moving through the world with a second-hand version of your rhythm. But it's offbeat, because authenticity can't be downloaded. It has to be bled for, and they've never been cut deep enough to speak from that kind of wound. You didn't get this presence from affirmations and soft mornings. You got it from dragging yourself out of dark holes when even your own shadow turned its back on you. From screaming into pillows until your throat went silent and still getting up the next day like nothing happened. From grieving people who were still alive and accepting that sometimes closure never shows up. Just the echo of your own footsteps moving forward anyway. They saw the fragments of your past and thought you'd crumble under the weight of being remembered, but instead you weaponized every piece. You stitched pain into armor, turned disappointment into direction, let failure teach you a language they don't speak, because their vocabulary doesn't include resilience without applause. They don't know what it's like to rebuild your entire identity in silence, to walk around feeling like a ghost because the old version of you is gone, but the new one isn't fully born yet. They don't know how it feels to make peace with becoming a stranger to your own reflection, because growth ripped everything familiar off your bones. You do. You know exactly what that feels like. You've lived through internal earthquakes that didn't leave visible scars, but left your soul limping for miles. And you didn't just walk through that, you ran with it. They underestimate you because your power doesn't show up screaming. It whispers, it stares, it lingers, and it changes people without asking for permission. You've got this calm to you now. Not the calm that says, "I'm fine," but the one that says, "Try me again and watch what happens." They hate that you don't flinch anymore, that the things that used to make you spiral barely register now. You've been through worse and walked it off. You've been left, lied to, written off. And somehow, you got clearer, cleaner, scarier. Not because you became cruel, but because you stopped needing to be understood. Because you stopped trying to explain storms to people who've only ever known sunshine. They can't touch you anymore. Not because you built walls, but because you became the sky. Too big, too vast, too far gone for small minds and petty games. They still don't know how you did it, how you turned every breakdown into a breakthrough without losing the softness in your eyes or the weight in your voice. You became everything they said you'd never be, without ever becoming like them. And that's what really eats them alive. They replay the way you used to doubt yourself, thinking that version of you might still exist somewhere. But it doesn't. That version died quietly the day you stopped asking for permission to be dangerous. The day you stopped apologizing for the way your presence made others uncomfortable. The day you looked at your own reflection and decided to rebuild from the bones up. They're still hoping to find some crack in the foundation, some evidence that this version of you is temporary. But they don't understand that you didn't level up, you evolved. This isn't a phase, it's a permanent scar that turned into structure. They can't wrap their heads around the idea that someone could walk through that much wreckage and still carry themselves like royalty. You didn't learn this energy from books. You earned it in silence while people you loved walked away, like you were easy to forget. You learned how to be loyal to your own heartbeat, 'cause everything else felt like background noise. And you mastered how to sit in pain without letting it define your name. They look for weakness. They scan your expression, hoping to catch a slip, some glimpse of the old hesitation you used to wear like second skin. But your eyes don't shake anymore. Not because the fear is gone, but because you stopped letting it drive. You learned how to carry fear like a pocket knife, useful, sharp, never in control. They try to mimic your confidence, but skip the part where it costs you everything. They want the outcome without the origin story. They want your fire without the burn marks. They want your impact without the isolation, your glow without the blackout. Nights where even breathing felt like betrayal. You're not impressive because you're untouched. You're terrifying because you're untouchable now. Not because you're bulletproof, but because you've taken every hit and refused to die slow. Because you let every lost tattoo meaning into your spine, and now your posture carries stories that silence rooms. They never expected to be humbled by someone they dismissed. They never thought the person they once looked past would be the same one making them question who they really are. You weren't supposed to matter to them, but you do. Not because you tried, but because you became the version of yourself they wish they had the guts to become. Well, look at you. You glorious, unbothered freak of fucking nature. You absolute glitch in the goddamn simulation. You, the one they side-eyed, whispered about, laughed at like hyenas around a fire. And now, they're staring like they just saw a ghost with a billion-dollar blueprint. Remember those days when you walked into a room and the air changed, but not because they admired you. No, because they didn't know what the hell you were. You didn't fit. You didn't play along. You didn't shrink. You said weird shit. Dressed how you wanted. Thought different. Felt too much. You were a little off, remember? Too deep. Too intense. Too fucking alive. And what did they do? They labeled you. Weird. Off. Try hard. Delusional. Because mediocrity gets real uncomfortable around greatness before it blooms. And you were already blooming in a garden they couldn't even pronounce. They had no idea what you were building in silence, what you were enduring in the dark, what you were crafting while they were scrolling, mocking, sleepwalking through life. They saw your silence and mistook it for defeat. They saw your solitude and thought it was loneliness. They saw your scars and assumed you were broken, not knowing those scars were battle medals, bitch. You weren't weird. You were wired different. Wired for war. Wired for vision. Wired for something so heavy, so cosmic, that their cookie-cutter minds couldn't process it. But oh, how the tables turn, because now you walk into rooms. And they don't call you weird. They shut the hell up. They tilt their heads. They whisper to each other like children witnessing some ancient power awaken. How'd you do that? How? You survived what they couldn't even comprehend. You outlasted storms they would have begged to escape. You weaponized every insult, every betrayal, every fecking breakdown, and turned them into a throne. You didn't get lucky. You got dangerous. You stopped begging to be understood. You stopped explaining yourself to people who couldn't even explain their own emotions. You stopped showing up to conversations where your name was only ever used as a punchline. And you started walking like your ancestors carved your bones out of rebellion. You started speaking like your voice carried the echoes of every soul who was ever silenced. You stopped saying sorry for being intense and started burning brighter instead. Now they double back. Now they hit you up with that awkward fake laugh. Wow, you've changed. Damn right, bitch. I evolved. I mutated into what your world couldn't cage. They used to talk about you like a joke. Now they talk about you like a legend. Now your name shows up in rooms you've never even walked into. Now people you've never met got you pinned to their mood boards like some kind of myth. And all of a sudden everyone wants to know, how'd you do it? You did it by not quitting when nobody clapped, by creating when no one was watching, by believing in yourself when the entire room was just waiting for you to fail, by staying weird, staying wild, staying unfuckwithable. They want the secret. They want the formula. They want to download the blueprint to your brain like it's some kind of shortcut to greatness. But here's the truth. There is no shortcut to being you. There's no download button for decades of doubt you turned into drive. No app for the nights you cried so hard you thought you'd explode. No filter for the rage you alchemized into purpose. No edit for the trauma you built an empire on. They don't really want the answer. They just don't want to admit you were right. That the shit they called crazy was actually genius. That the passion they mocked was prophecy. That the weird kid they laughed at is now the blueprint they're stealing from. So let them ask, let them wonder, let them choke on their own confusion, because the moment you stopped chasing their approval, you became untouchable. You didn't rise, you erupted, you glitched the matrix by daring to be exactly who the fuck you are. And now they whisper your name with respect they were too scared to show you when you were down, bad, and dangerous. From "you're weird" to "how'd you do that?" Damn right, book. Watch them freeze up when you walk by, like their nervous systems short-circuit at the sheer audacity of your presence. They used to smirk, now they study. They used to mock, now they mimic. Same mouths, different tones, same faces, but this time there's fear behind the fake smiles. Because you didn't fold like they expected. You didn't crumble under the weight of their doubt. You absorbed that shit. You inhaled their hate, metabolized it into strategy, and spit it back as excellence. You took every side-eye, every fake-ass laugh, every dismissive comment, and you turned it into fuel like a goddamn machine, built for vengeance. Every time they underestimated you, you stacked it like ammo, quiet, focused, patient. They thought you were silent, 'cause you had nothing to say. Nah, you were loading the fuck up. And when you finally moved, whole tectonic plates shifted. You're not even showing off. You're just existing, and that alone makes them uncomfortable. Because they still live to be liked, to be accepted, to be palatable. And you burnt that shit to the ground a long time ago. You walk different now, like you've already survived the fire they're still scared of. You talk like every word is laced with purpose because you've buried pieces of yourself in graves they don't even know exist. And the wildest part? You didn't need revenge. You became the reminder. Every room you enter, you remind them of who laughed, who doubted, who looked at your chaos and couldn't see the cosmos inside it. They don't get it. They never will. They think, how'd you do that? But what they're really asking is, how did you survive being you in a world like this? A world that tried to sandpaper your edges down until you disappeared into dust. A world that only claps for you once you bleed enough for them to feel something. A world that wants you loud enough to entertain, but not loud enough to disrupt. You were born to disrupt, to break the mold. You weren't made for 9-to-5 chains and dinner table small talk. You were built for legacy, for chaos with direction, for storms that leave the world different than they found it. You were the red flag they should have paid attention to, but they were too busy laughing. And while they were laughing, you were building a mind that bends rules, building a heart that doesn't need validation to beat loud, building a presence that makes silence louder than their noise ever was. You weren't weird, you were dangerously original. A walking paradox, too deep to be shallow, too bold to blend in, too real to fake it just to get likes. You kept your soul while they sold theirs for a bit of comfort and attention. You chose the long road, the hard way, the sleepless nights, the internal wars, because somewhere inside, you knew you were never meant to just exist. You were meant to impact. Every second you stayed true to yourself was a war won. Every no you gave to conformity was a weapon drawn. And every time they said, "You're doing too much," you were actually doing exactly what they never had the spine to attempt. They want your confidence. They want your aura. They want that something that makes people lean in when you speak. That magnetic chaos that wraps around you like a crown made of scars. They can't replicate it. They don't have the blueprint because the blueprint was written in your pain, your isolation, your years in the dark with nothing but your own willpower and rage. And what they don't understand, they envy. What they envy, they try to label. And what they try to label can't be controlled. You're not some fluke. You're the proof that becoming unbreakable doesn't come from applause. It comes from being unapologetically misunderstood until the day the world has no choice but to notice. You didn't need their permission. You needed the pressure. You needed the fire. You needed to be doubted, dismissed, ignored, because it sharpened you. You weren't designed for easy. You were crafted in chaos to be the very thing that turns comfort into discomfort. They wanted you to dim it down, but you lit that shht up like a warning sign. They wanted you digestible, but you made yourself unforgettable. They wanted you quiet, but now you echo in every corner of their insecurity, and it eats at them. How you never begged, never chased, never adjusted your volume to make their egos comfortable. You just kept being you, raw, untamed, messy, brilliant. You let the world keep throwing shade, and you stood there collecting it like ammo for the next level. Every time they talked behind your back, you smiled. Because deep down, you knew. They wouldn't be whispering if you weren't shaking something. They can't wrap their heads around it. How someone they wrote off as a punchline came back as the fesking headline. Their weird turned into wonder. Their insults turned into inspiration. They're quoting you without even realizing it, trying to walk like you, talk like you, brand themselves like you. And it still doesn't hit the same because they weren't built in the silence. They weren't forged in the fire. They just want the after, but they don't know a single goddamn thing about the before. They didn't see you pacing at 3 a.m., trying to turn panic into purpose. They didn't hear the inner wars, the breakdowns, the silent screams that nobody clapped for. They didn't see you show up anyway. Empty tank, full heart. Dragging yourself through days that felt like hell in slow motion, but still creating, still building, still showing the fuck up when nobody was watching. That's what they're trying to imitate, but it can't be faked. That type of presence comes from pain with precision, from turning every "you'll never make it" into a damn war drum. It comes from walking into spaces where you weren't invited and making it impossible for them to ignore you. Not by shouting, but by becoming undeniable. You're not one of them. You never were. They were programmed to blend in. You were wired to break shit. To speak the unspeakable. To disrupt the rhythm they've been trapped in since birth. You're the glitch that turns the script upside down and makes people question everything they believed about what success is supposed to look like. Because you didn't climb the ladder, you set the fucking thing on fire and built your own. One that moves when you move. One that bends to your design. And the people who said you were too much are still stuck asking permission to be half of what you already are. They can't handle it because you became what they never had the guts to imagine. You stopped fitting into the box they were building for you and started building your own goddamn world instead. You're not chasing dreams. You're dragging them into reality by the throat. One boundary at a time, one bold move at a time, one "fuck this, I'm doing it my way" at a time. They used to think you were trying too hard, but what they're finally realizing is you were just trying hard enough to escape the life they settled for. You never wanted their acceptance. You wanted your freedom, and now that you've tasted it, you walk like someone who's not afraid to lose anything that costs your peace. They still don't get it. They want to know, how'd you do that? But they wouldn't survive a single day inside your mind, couldn't last an hour carrying the weight of your vision. They don't understand what it's like to want something so bad, you're willing to bleed for it, sacrifice sleep for it, risk rejection over and over for it, because deep in your bones, you know it's already yours. You're just dragging reality into alignment with your fucking destiny. You carry that destiny like a loaded weapon. No safety, no silence, just pressure building behind every step you take. You walk through rooms like you own the algorithm, like the air rearranges itself just to keep up with your energy. People feel it before you even speak, that pull, that tension, that unapologetic presence that doesn't ask for space. It claims it. You became the storm they never forecasted, the chaos they thought they could laugh away, the masterpiece they tried to label as a mess. They watched you from a distance, convinced you were spiraling, but you weren't breaking. You were shedding the roles, the masks, the watered-down version of yourself they could stomach. You stopped performing for approval and started performing surgery on your own identity, cutting out every piece that didn't belong to the real you. And that version, the real you, the one that didn't make sense to them, the one they tried to silence, mock, overlook. That version is a problem. That version walks in truth that doesn't flinch. That version laughs at conformity, eats rejection for breakfast, and wakes up fueled by the disbelief in their eyes. You're not confused anymore. You're clear. And clarity is terrifying to people still running from their reflection. You weren't born to follow trends. You were born to make reality glitch. You shift timelines just by refusing to fit the mold. You say HT that cracks people's programming wide open. You exist in a way that makes those still faking it feel exposed. You're not extra. You're evidence that authenticity burns hotter than any facade they could ever construct. And the wildest part, you don't even need the spotlight. You are the light. You carry it through the darkness like a torch made from every moment you were counted out. They don't see the blueprint. They can't decode the architecture of your madness because they're still stuck trying to copy your moves when they should have been studying your mindset. You weren't just different. You were dangerous to the system because you think for yourself, because you trust your gut more than their trends, because you'd rather starve with integrity than feast on fake applause. They still whisper your name, like they're scared you might hear them. They don't know whether to envy you, admire you, or try to kill the vibe from a distance. They're conflicted because deep down, they remember the shit they said. And now they're watching you live out the exact future they swore you'd never reach. And it's not just success that haunts them. It's the audacity that you had to keep going when they were betting against you with their whole chest. You're the walking consequence of their ignorance. Every step you take drips with the reality that they were wrong. Every win you post is a funeral for the version of you they thought wouldn't survive. And you don't even have to say a word, because the silence around you speaks louder than their old opinions ever did. They scroll past your name with that tight feeling in their chest, pretending they're not watching, pretending they're not bothered. pretending your glow-up isn't the same shit they used to call delusion. They remember the shit they said, the smirks, the passive-aggressive jokes, the backhanded advice dressed up as concern, all that fake support that felt like a setup in disguise. And you peeped it all, clocked it, stored it, not for revenge, for reference, because you knew the day would come, the day where your name leaves a mark in every space they swore you'd never be in, the day where you'd be the example they use in the same circles that once laughed at the sound of your ambition, the same people who said, "You're doing too much," now low-key, studying your every move like it's a master class. They used to say you were weird. Now they want the cheat codes to your entire aura. But they don't get it. You didn't glow up. You grew teeth. You shed the version of you that made them comfortable. You stopped apologizing for making noise in rooms that only accepted silence from you. You stopped shrinking to make space for cowards playing it safe. You grew into something they don't have a category for. Not influencer, not intellectual, not artist, not entrepreneur. You're a movement, the kind they can't pin down or predict. Because every time they think they've figured you out, you flip the script and reinvent yourself mid-scene. Your growth wasn't aesthetic, it was surgical. You cut through trauma like it owed you rent. You stood face to face with your own demons and didn't flinch. You rebuilt yourself from rubble with nothing but grit and a vision. No handouts, no shortcuts, no damn audience clapping while you bled. And now, every step you take sends signals. Every look in your eye carries a language they're not fluent in. Because confidence like yours isn't loud. It's lethal, not performative, permanent. It comes from knowing what you've been through and owning what you've become. They don't ask, what happened? They ask, how'd you get like this? But the truth is, they wouldn't survive the answer. They wouldn't last a week carrying what you've carried, feeling what you've felt, building what you've built with nothing but your name, your pain, and your refusal to fold. You're not a story they can skim. You're a whole vefting volume written in code they're too shallow to translate. You move with purpose that punches through the fog of their fake lives. You breathe different, walk heavier, speak lighter. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you've seen too much to pretend anymore. You're not chasing dreams. You're dragging reality by the throat until it bends. You're showing up for every version of yourself that was told to sit down, shut up, stay quiet, blend in, give up. And every time you speak, every time you win, every time you stand tall in a world that begged you to crawl, you prove them wrong without saying a single word. It's the silence that hits different. The way they glance, pause, overthink, before speaking around you like they know the energy's shifted and they're walking on ground they no longer recognize. That silence is heavy, because it's filled with everything they never said, everything they never thought you'd become, every prediction they made that blew up in their face the second you stepped into your power. You were the one they pitied, the one they worried about. That subtle fake concern that always came dressed in judgment. They thought you were spiraling when you were evolving. They thought you were lost when you were cutting ties with the version of yourself that needed their approval to breathe. And you took every ounce of that weight and turned it into motion. You built while they gossiped. You studied while they posted. You stayed consistent while they coasted. You stayed locked in, not because it was easy, but because deep down, you knew you'd rather drown in your purpose than float comfortably in their shallow little puddles. That's what scares them. That your hunger never needed an audience. That your glow wasn't manufactured. It was earned through sleepless nights, broken trust, and the kind of pain that doesn't come with a support group or a manual. You got here bleeding, limping, heart taped up with your own hands, and you still walk louder than people who've had everything handed to them. They don't want to admit it, but they're watching every post, every move, half hating, half wishing they had the balls to do what you did. Because while they played it safe, you risked everything just to find the version of yourself they were too afraid to meet. And now, you're that version, the one who walks into rooms and shifts the temperature without saying a word. The one who makes people straighten up, over-explain, check themselves. Because your very presence is a mirror. And some people hate what they see reflected back when they stand next to someone who refused to fake it. You didn't become better. You became real. You dropped the act. You let go of the watered-down mask they liked better and brought your full, unfiltered self to the front. Well, well, well. Look who finally showed up at the right time. The one who's been walking through hell with a smile like nothing's burning. Yeah, you've been getting hit from all sides, haven't you? People snaking you out quietly, life throwing uppercuts, like it's personal. And the worst part, you're starting to wonder if you're fighting this war alone. Let me set the damn record straight. You're not. See, you don't even realize the weight of the spiritual gang war going on over your soul right now. You just feel tired. You feel drained. You feel like giving the fuck up. But behind that exhaustion is something heavy moving, behind that silence. There's destruction being carried out on your behalf, no cap. You ain't seeing the war, but someone's out there fucking shit up for you. Quietly, ruthlessly, without posting a single damn thing about it. Your enemy's been getting touched. You thought they got away with it, didn't you? All those fake friends, the ones who smiled in your face and plotted the second you turned around. They ain't just losing, they're being ripped apart from the inside. The ones who tried to sabotage your name, they're having quiet breakdowns, sudden job losses, weird sickness, unexplainable depression. They're screaming in empty rooms while you sleep peacefully, not even knowing why you had the best sleep of the year. That's the real flex. You didn't even lift a finger. And they're breaking. Because someone out there saw what they did and said, not this one. Not today. You're wondering why it doesn't feel like a win yet. Because growth doesn't always feel good. Justice don't come with trumpets. It sneaks in while you're healing and drops the hammer when you're no longer looking for revenge. You wanted proof. But you don't need to see it. Because real vengeance doesn't ask for your permission. It just handles shit. You feel like you're walking blind, but truth is, you're being shielded from what was meant for you, but never reached you. You don't know how many bullets have been dodged on your behalf, how many lies got exposed before they made it to your doorstep, how many curses broke off your name the second they whispered it. You have no clue how much has already been done, just because you kept waking up. Being protected don't mean being untouched. It means you survived what should have ended you. It means you took hits that would have crushed someone else and still had the guts to keep your damn heart beating. Being chosen is lonely. It's heavy. It makes you question if it's even worth it. But here's the dark truth. The more shit that falls apart around you, the more proof that something bigger is fighting for you. Your chaos ain't random. Your pain ain't meaningless. You're not cursed. You're being rebuilt through demolition, and every fake person that got stripped from your life, that was surgical removal, not coincidence. Let me tell you something. Whoever's fighting for you, whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, your ancestors, that dark voice inside you that's sick of the bullshit. They don't miss. They ain't out here making inspirational speeches. They're pulling strings, triggering karma, turning your name into a warning label, making sure the next person who thinks about crossing you feels an immediate chill down their spine. You don't gotta prove yourself no more. You don't gotta explain why you cut them off. You don't even gotta defend your silence, because they're getting the message now. You still breathing? Good. Then you already won half the war, because every time they thought you'd fold, you stood back up. Didn't matter how messy, didn't matter how slow, you kept getting the fuck back up. And that's what scares them, not your smile, not your talent, not your success. It's the fact that you never stayed down. You took hell and made a home in it. You built muscle where most people would have begged for mercy. You made peace with your pain. And now, it obeys you. Let me tell you this straight. You're not just surviving. You're becoming a storm. And everyone who ever bet against you, they're already paying the price. Every fake prayer they sent your way returned to sender. Every time they laughed at your downfall, screenshots of that moment gonna haunt them when they see you winning. You may not see the battlefield, but make no mistake, your name is being protected like gold. Your energy is guarded, and your comeback, it's already being broadcasted, just not to you yet. Keep going, keep moving, and when it gets quiet, don't get scared. That's just the part where the hit list is being executed. You ever wonder why some people suddenly go quiet around you? Why folks who used to throw shade now pretend they don't see you? That ain't random. That's fear dressed up in awkward silence. They can feel what's on you. Not just success, not just growth, judgment. And not the kind that waits till the end. The kind that pulls up with boots on and receipts in hand. They don't talk slick no more. Because the last time they tried, shit in their life started crumbling in 8K. Friendships fell apart. Money dried up. Their own people turned on them. They started looking around like, what's happening to me? You happened. Because when you're divinely backed, when you're being fought for from behind the curtain, every curse they whisper becomes a loaded gun that spins around and blows a hole in their own plans. See, it ain't even about revenge anymore. It's about preservation. Your energy got too expensive to be touched without consequence. That's why their fake smiles feel shaky now. That's why they stutter when they greet you. That's why they forgot to invite you, but accidentally watch every single thing you post. You're not even trying to flex, but everything about your presence is a trigger now, because your peace is their punishment. Your joy is the karma they never saw coming. And your silence, that's the loudest fucking alarm in the universe letting them know you're not alone, and they're not safe. They thought they were fighting you, but the second they targeted your spirit, they signed up for a war against something they'll never be built to survive. You didn't clap back, but shit still fell apart for them. You didn't expose them, but the right people found out anyway. You didn't even speak on what they did, and yet their own guilt got them moving like fugitives. You're not crazy for noticing it. You're not paranoid. You're connected, plugged into a power that doesn't need cameras or applause to dismantle every setup made against you. They keep trying to move on, but something keeps pulling them back into the chaos they created. Every time they think it's over, another wave hits, and they're starting to figure it out. This ain't just karma. This is protection with teeth. You want to know why you didn't fold? Because something ancient in your blood refused to let you. You were built with too much grit, too much fire. You ain't soft like they thought. You ain't fragile like they hoped. You're battle-hardened, trauma-fed, and spiritually strapped the fuck up. You've been dragged, lied on, left out, counted out, but never broken, never erased, never defeated, because every time they threw dirt, your roots got deeper. Every time they tried to bury you, they accidentally planted you in better soil. They keep wondering why you're still standing, why you keep glowing like that, why you don't look bitter, angry, drained. They don't realize you didn't just survive. You leveled up in silence. While they were talking, you were healing. While they were plotting, you were rising. While they were trying to kill your name, someone was writing your next chapter in gold. Your elevation ain't even finished yet. You're just in the early stages of the flip. That unsettling peace you've been feeling lately, that's the calm that comes when the storm has already passed. But the aftermath is still chasing those who caused it. And it's hitting them in places that can't be seen from the outside. You don't need to watch it unfold. They're living the consequences every day now. They feel it every time they scroll past your wins. Every time they hear your name in rooms they thought you'd never enter. Every time they try to laugh and can't remember why it doesn't feel right anymore. That's not coincidence. That's divine fallout. And they're stuck in the middle of the blast zone. They didn't just underestimate you. They mocked you, laughed at your low points, talked behind your back like you were permanently stuck there, made jokes off your pain, and shared screenshots of your breakdowns like it was entertainment. They ain't realized they were building your legend, feeding it, giving it roots, because every hit they threw made your comeback heavier, harder, and unavoidable. It's wild how they swore you were weak, but somehow you're still breathing while their lives look like open wounds that never closed right. They've been trying to manifest peace while swimming in the same darkness they wished on you. You were the target, but the boomerang curved back around and hit him in broad daylight. You stopped defending yourself because you finally understood your worth. Your name don't belong in the same mouth that tried to tear it down. You outgrew their noise. You outgrew the lies. And now they're stuck watching you move different, unbothered, unreachable, and unfuckwithable. People don't change because you ask them to. They change when life humbles the shit out of them. And right now, a lot of people who thought they were untouchable are learning what it feels like to get touched spiritually, financially, emotionally, in ways they can't trace back to anything you did, but everything they shouldn't have done. You ain't need revenge. Your peace became punishment. You ain't throw dirt back. Your success turned into a shovel they buried themselves with. You ain't expose 'em. Truth got tired of being patient and dragged them into the light anyway. You ever notice how people who moved funny towards you end up dealing with unexplainable losses? Opportunities vanish. Relationships fall apart. They get left on red by the same crowd they ditched you for. They start looking cursed. And it's not because you wished it. It's because you were never the one to play with. They saw your loyalty as weakness, your silence as submission, your kindness as softness. They didn't realize you were just holding back chaos. You could have clapped back, but you didn't. You could have exposed everything, but you stayed quiet. You could have wished pain on them, but you didn't have to. Something higher had already seen enough. That force, it don't play fair. It don't forget. And it don't stop until the balance is restored. Which is why certain people been watching their lives decay like fruit left in the sun. Slow, sour, stinking of guilt. They ain't even mad at you anymore. They're mad at themselves for misreading your silence, for mistaking your love for weakness, for throwing away someone they'll never have access to again. They thought you were the soft one in the room, but you were just the only one who hadn't snapped yet. And when you stopped giving them access to you, that's when the real war began. Not the one you could see, but the one that's been ruining their comfort in real time. Some of the people who hurt you are still alive, but dead inside now. They laugh online, but cry in silence. They post wins, but can't feel them. They smile in photos, but have nightmares that wake them up in cold sweats. Because their spirit knows it. They crossed a line with someone they were never supposed to fuck with. Some of them walk around like they're fine, posting like nothing's wrong, smiling with people who don't know the truth, laughing at things that don't even land anymore. But it's all surface. Underneath, they're rotting quietly from the inside out. Because guilt don't always scream. Sometimes it just eats their peace, eats their sleep, eats their ability to be fully present. They out in public, but they ain't really there. Because your ghost is sitting in every damn room they enter. Not the ghost of you dying, the ghost of the you they lost access to. You didn't do black magic. You didn't hex nobody. You just stopped showing up for the people who used your loyalty as a weapon against you. And that absence, that's the curse. They feel it every day. And the craziest part? They'll never admit it. They'll pretend it's unrelated, but deep down, when everything's quiet, when the lights go off and the fake confidence wears thin, they feel that void clawing at them. Because you were the blessing they mishandled. You ever notice how they try to copy your peace now? They mimic your healing era, use your language, steal the tone you set. But it don't hit the same, because it ain't coming from pain survived. It's coming from shame they're still pretending don't exist. They thought the real you was weak. But truth is, they never even met the real you. The real you was buried under trauma, loyalty, overthinking, and trying to prove your worth to people who were never qualified to judge you. But once that version died, the new one came back like a damn executioner with a smile. And this version of you. You don't beg, you don't chase, you don't explain, you don't need closure. Because the damage already told you everything you needed to know. You became the one thing they never prepared for, untouchable. You used to feel everything too deeply. Now you move like a ghost with perfect memory and zero tolerance. You don't throw shade. Your silence burns louder than any words could. You don't play mind games. You let people lose access to you and deal with the withdrawal like a cold sweat detox. They underestimated your power because they thought power was loud. They thought it was dominance, drama, shouting. They didn't realize the real killers move in silence, and the most dangerous version of you doesn't scream. It just smiles and disappears. You gave people heaven and they spit in it. Now they got front row seats in hell, watching you glow, like you ain't been through every circle of it. They used to be part of your story, but now they just plot devices in your rise. They helped build your darkness, and you turned it into armor, into fuel, into a motherfucking weapon they'll never be able to unsee. They ain't scared of your success. They're scared of your evolution because the old you, they could guilt trip that one. They could bait that one into arguments. They could breadcrumb attention and watch you chase it like you ain't know your worth. But the version of you walking around now, you don't even blink at the shit that used to shatter you. You got too familiar with pain to be intimidated by people. too acquainted with betrayal to fall for fake love again. You don't argue anymore. You just vanish. You don't explain yourself. You let them sit with their own confusion until it becomes a mirror. They thought they broke you. What they did was wake up something ancient inside you. Something that don't flinch, don't cry, don't explain, don't wait for apologies that never come. You're not healed like a saint. You're healed like a weapon that's been sharpened in silence, polished by sleepless nights, forged in betrayal, tempered by losing people who swore they'd never leave. They don't realize how dangerous it is to hurt someone who builds character in chaos. You've been down bad in silence too many times. You've cried in bathrooms, smiled through betrayal, and kept showing up while you were mentally bleeding out. That's why this version of you don't negotiate anymore. You don't beg people to stay. You don't remind people how to treat you. You just watch their access expire like an unused password and move like their chapter got burned out the book. And it's not bitterness. It's clarity. They showed you what they are. They taught you exactly what they'd do if they thought you were weak one more time. And instead of yelling, you just turned cold. Cold enough to survive anything. Cold enough to burn everything you used to cling to. They started the war, but they ain't expect you to turn into a goddamn landmine. Silent, unmoving, and fatal the moment they tried to come back. People who used to have you wrapped around their finger now can't even get you to reply. People who swore you'd never make it without them are watching you eat at the same table they tried to flip. And that's what hurts the most. Not that you made it, but that you didn't need them to do it. That you ain't come back to flex, to gloat, to explain. You just kept rising, with the same energy they left you for dead in. The moment they lost control over you, they started rewriting the story, twisting facts, painting you as cold, changed, acting different. But the truth, you didn't switch up. You just woke the fuck up. You finally saw what was always there, the manipulation hidden in the compliments, the passive-aggressive digs disguised as jokes, the way they kept you small just enough to feel needed, but never enough to feel free. They weren't feeding your soul. They were draining it slow, like leeches dressed in fake love and "I'm just looking out for you" masks. You outgrew the leash they built for you, the one made of guilt, obligation, and trauma bonding. You ain't toxic for leaving. You were toxic for staying as long as you did. They didn't expect you to break the cycle because cycles are comfy for cowards. They live in loops. Repeat the same dusty patterns. Pray you forget the way they left you bleeding, and when you finally stepped off that carousel. They didn't know how to function without your forgiveness as on demand. You were the emotional dump they used to cleanse their sins, the punching bag for their projections, the therapist they never paid, the safety net they cut holes in every time you tried to rise, and still expected you to catch them when they fell. But the new you hand out silence like it's holy water. You ghost like a seasoned exorcist. You let people talk crazy and don't flinch, because you know damn well you're not arguing with demons you already cast out. They don't know what to do with this version of you, the one that doesn't chase closure, the one that doesn't explain why they're blocked, the one that doesn't turn the other cheek, because both cheeks got slapped already and you remember everything. This ain't bitterness, it's spiritual surgery, and you finally cut out everything that kept infecting your peace. You were never meant to shrink to fit their comfort. You were never meant to tolerate being almost loved. You were never meant to keep bleeding for people who got full off watching you suffer quietly. They can't look you in the eye anymore because your presence is a reflection of their failure to destroy you. They thought you were theirs to break. They thought they could twist the knife and you'd just sit there, asking what you did wrong. But that innocence? Dead. Buried in the same grave they tried to dig for your future. You don't wish them well. You don't wish them harm. You just don't wish them anything at all. And that's worse than hate, because hate means you still care. But you walked away with nothing left to give.